Corporation, and I'm a presenter at Ubuntu Radio. Thank you so much for coming. The lecture will start in 10 minutes. We're just waiting for the deputy ministers and the leadership of the university to come in. And as is protocol in the world of diplomacy, when the leaders arrive, we stand up and welcome them. We'll do that, right? Thank you so much for coming. I want to find out who has had breakfast already? I'm seeing one hand, but the muffins are finished outside. I do not understand. What happened? What happened? They fell. Okay, let me go and look for them because, wow, we need to pick them up one by one because otherwise we'll have to have muffins again for lunch. Yo. But thank you so much. Just to let you know that this I'm going to also mention when the program starts. Representation from our career desk. So those who are completing their studies, might be law, international relations, social studies, social development. There are a lot of opportunities within the Department of International Relations and Cooperation that the representative from our career office will also speak about. So don't leave after the Q&A session. May we stand to welcome the Deputy Minister and the leadership of the university. Thank you so much. You may take a seat. Thank you. Thank you so much, and welcome. My name is Tarimu Njezi. This marks the beginning of our lecture, and it's really a pleasure for me to be given the opportunity to direct the program this morning. Thank you so much for coming, and welcome. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome everybody, but also to invite into the podium Ms. Noma Zondo, who is the Executive Director here at the university, responsible for corporate relations. And we want to welcome her, and I would like us to give her a big hand as she come and occupy the seat right on my far right. Thank you so much for coming. And also it gives me great pleasure to welcome you, Prof. Prof. Devi Nimala Gopal. Thank you so much for coming. Yes, a seat right here next to me. Thank you so much, this seat right here. Thank you. I should not be welcoming you to your own university. But thank you so much for the opportunity. It talks about the close cooperation between the Department of International Relations and cooperation together with this important academic institution as well. Deputy Minister Botes, this is not the first time this department is partnering with the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and it's quite important that this relationship is blossoming year in and year out. And we are happy that you have honored us with this important lecture that you're going to deliver. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to take a seat right in the middle. Thank you so much. Let's welcome the Deputy Minister. Thank you very much. I think we'll Director responsible for corporate affairs to just welcome us. I've did a mini welcome, but I will tell you that in 2001, when I was in matric, I know it looks like I did matric 5 years back. me and my friend, we were just thinking which university we should attend. So my friend Mandla Chikororo ended up at UKZN. I'm jealous. And I end up somewhere in the Eastern Cape. So I'm glad that he's now a practicing doctor in the province of Free State. So from this university, we come from the same village. So I wanted to thank you so much for continually making impact in our society as well, back in Venda as well. So the institution's role is being seen and felt across the country, not only in the province as well. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you. Just thought I should make that remarks as well. I could also call him now to say I was also in UKZN, in different capacity that is. Thank you so much. Let's welcome him.
Thank you so much, Program Director Mr. Mujezi. I think at that time you probably didn't know that UKZN is a university of choice, because you would have made the right choice. But anyway, we're happy to host you today. Our esteemed keynote speaker, Deputy Minister for International Relations and Cooperation, Mr. Alvis Botus, honored government officials and diplomats, members of council who are present today, members of UKZN executive, fellow colleagues, student, alumni, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly an honor to stand here before you today on behalf of the University of KwaZulu-Natal as we gather today, as we gather this morning for what promises to be an exciting and enlightening and reflective discussion on South Africa's foreign policy journey over the past 30 years. This event holds a particular significance, especially for us, because it gives us the chance to reflect, to look back, evaluate, and also consider how our foreign policy has evolved since the dawn of democracy. At a time when South Africa's foreign policy is gaining more and more attention, it is befitting that we take a moment to assess where we stand. In recent months, our bold stand on the Israel-Palestinian conflict has gathered much public discourse. This is a prime example of how South Africa continues to exercise its voice on the international stage, which we're very proud of, while rooted in ethics, human rights, and a deep commitment to justice. Foreign policy, however, extends beyond single issues. It is a powerful guiding force, especially in moments of global uncertainty. You will remember that during the height of COVID-19 pandemic, we saw our government effectively coordinating responses, making meaningful contributions to global efforts. This reflected not only our dedication to protecting national and continental interests, but also our deep sense of responsibility as a member of the international community. Here at UKZN, the implications of South Africa's foreign policy are felt deeply. As a university that is striving to be a beacon of African scholarship, our international collaborations and efforts towards targeted internationalization are inextricably linked to the country's diplomatic relationships. South Africa's leading roles in global and continental institutions present us with the opportunities to foster our academic partnership, attract scholars and students from around the world, and also enhance our research footprint. These international partnerships enrich our intellectual landscape, bringing fresh perspectives, knowledge, and innovation into academic spaces. In turn, they strengthen our universities' research outputs and obviously our global reputation, aligning with our vision to be a premier university of African scholarship. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not here to take your time. I'm not here to dig deep into the intricacies of our policies. I'm here to introduce someone far more qualified to do so, the Deputy Minister for International Relations and Cooperation, Mr. Alvin Bottas. We are privileged to have him this morning with us. We are very lucky because, I think in a few days as well, we are going to be hosting the Minister of International Relations as well. Mr. Bottas comes with a wealth of experience and insights in the field of international relations. Since his appointment as a Deputy Minister back in May 2019, he has worked tirelessly to advance South Africa's diplomatic mission. His earlier roles serving as the MEC for Social Development and MEC for Cooperative Government, Human Settlement, as well as Traditional Affairs in the Northern Cape further attest to his dedication to public service and leadership. Not only does he bring experience from government, but his work within the African National Congress as a member of National Executive Committee and his involvement in the International Relations Subcommittee reflects his deep commitment to shaping South Africa's role on the world stage. It is therefore my great pleasure to invite the Deputy Minister to the stage, where I am certain that he will share his valuable insights and also provoke meaningful discussions and reflections on the South Africa's foreign policy, which plays a role in the discussion today. So please join me to welcome the Deputy Minister to the stage.
Let me just do sound check. I hope all of you have the Ubuntu magazine in front of you. So after today's engagement on page 86, there's an important responsibility for all KZN students to do. You know the South African goalkeeper. Is it what? Rowan Williams. He's the current goalkeeper of Africa, and he is now in a final and leading the voting for the FIFA goalkeeper of the year. So I would want to encourage all the students actually to vote for him. There's a system online, and Tlali, I think just before we leave, you'll just give them the details. It's a very simplified system. You will vote for the Dolenba and all the others, and as you swipe and go on, you will get to his section. That's what we call sports diplomacy in international relations, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Program Director, our anchor from Ubuntu radio station. I wish to acknowledge University of KZN, the council member with us today, Dr. Hay. Thank you very much for joining us. And then, of course, Professor Gopal and Director Zondo. Thank you very much for your kind words, faculty members, the leadership of the SRC. I have been told that they may be out campaigning still, because there's SRC elections the 10th and 11th. So let me wish you well with that ambition. And I want to obviously appreciate the students that are here today. Let me indicate it's obviously a distinct privilege to be here this morning, because South Africa are celebrating 30 years of democracy and freedom. And one of our key fights that this generation of young people must fight against is the fight against forgetfulness. That we look at South Africa through the optics of 1994 and not look at the reality that South Africa was a colonized nation from as far back as 1652, and that South Africa has been subjected to a brutal form of apartheid ideological orientation from 1948. And it's important for all students that are engaged in political economy, in international relations and political science. October month, ladies and gentlemen, also presents an important chapter within the diplomatic circles in South Africa and elsewhere. It is the month where we continue to celebrate the memories of Oliver Regional Tambo, whose birthday dates back to 1917, so it's the 107th year of birthday commemoration of Oliver Tambo. And we do so, ladies and gentlemen, to give credence to the role that Oliver Tambo have played as probably one of our most seasoned diplomats during the times of apartheid, and in particular his 30 years of protracted struggle in the international community, which ultimately led, ladies and gentlemen, to a decision of the United Nations to declare apartheid formally as a crime against humanity. So Oliver Tambo presents what we call the sum total of our accumulative experience of struggle. And that is why during this month we are obviously given homage to him and the role that he have played. We are gathered this morning here in KZN amidst what we could characterize as quite unique geopolitical difficulties that I think all of us have bear testimony to. The four key concentric circles upon which South Africa's foreign policy are premised on is the following four, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll briefly in my contribution speak on some of those issues. I hope that when you listen carefully, there's certain times that, because it's a public lecture, that I would not be able to give my express opinion because it would be diplomatically incorrect. But when I pose a question, it's important that the students engage on that type of questions. The first concentric circle, we speak about our Pan-Africanism as a country and as a nation. The second concentric circle, we speak about global solidarity, that we do regard ourselves as champion of global solidarity. The third, ladies and gentlemen, we speak about the need to continue to deepen cooperation with your more industrialized North. And the fourth, speak about transformation of global governance. So those are the four concentric circles which define South Africa's imperatives when we engage in international relations and execute our foreign policy perspectives. The first one, ladies and gentlemen, that I want to touch on, obviously working backwards, and sometimes you will appreciate that these foreign policy pillars are interdependent and interrelated but independent. And I'll try to briefly reflect on that issue. When we speak as South Africa about transformation of global governance institutions becomes the voice of the voiceless. That is what we speak about as South Africa. We have done that, ladies and gentlemen, because of a number of reasons. We have done that if we look at what we call the important role of the UN. Now, in the United Nations membership system, we have 193 member states that are formally recognized as UN member states. And the UN obviously have a number of concomitant organizations, such as your United Nations General Assembly, which is the one body where the accumulative interest of all member states should find expression into. And we just came from what we call UNGA 79 that was convened in the US. And then one of the other important structures that is pivotal for world peace and security is the United Nations Security Council, what we call the UNSC, isn't it so? Now the UNSC, ladies and gentlemen, is the only structure in the entire multilateral system that is the final arbiter and that has the powers to execute peace diplomacy. To execute peace diplomacy, but also to enforce peace missions. So it's the only structure. I'm raising it because students of IR would have appreciated, everyone speaks today about what? NATO. Isn't it so? You hear about NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But NATO is a regional military alliance. The only structure and fora within the UN that have the express mandate for world peace and security is the UNSC, the United Nations Security Council. It's such an important organization, but it's so untransformed. It's so important, but it's so untransformed. Why, ladies and gentlemen? For a very simple reason, that the UNSC is the consequence of the aftermath of the World War II, which and said that, look, under our watch, never again must world peace and security be threatened. And for that reason, we need to have an intermediary that will provide some sort of guarantor for world peace and security. And that's why the UNSC was then established. 5 members of the Security Council that have what we call a permanent status and that also possess a veto power. So yeah, you speak about the US, you speak about France and the UK, you speak about the PRC, which is China, and the Russian Federation. Are we at one? And then you have 10 other members. Some diplomats refer to them as the E10. It's those members that gets elected to become transitional stewards of world peace and security on a 2-year rotational basis. And it's for that reason that, for example, South Africa was elected for 3 times since the advent of democracy. We were elected for 3 times, ladies and gentlemen, from our first tenure was obviously in 2007 in the UNSC. Now, juxtapose that with the fact that in Africa alone, 70% of the workload of the UNSC is seized with African conflicts, African peace and security issues. But in the entirety of the UN system, you don't have an African seat that is permanent, and you only have 3 African countries, what we call the A3, that are there on a rotational basis every 2 years. Do you understand the problem that we face with? Remember earlier on I said it's one of the most important structures, but the most untransformed structures. So it's for that reason that what is in our lexicon, we speak about the African common position as espoused in the Isolawene consensus, where we say at least Africa must have 2 seats at a permanent basis in the UNSC. So that is our big fight when we speak about transformation of global governance institutions, and probably as an update from where we are with the Isolawene consensus is that we have obviously taken note that during the week of UNGA 79, one of the permanent members of the Security Council in the form of the US have raised the fact that probably it's about time that Africa gets 2 permanent seats in the Security Council without a veto power. Now let us be unequivocal. We regard that as a non-proposal. It's a non-proposal, isn't it so? It's a non-proposal. It's the same thing if you as young people one day leave the university and you get married, and then you propose marriage to your partner, and your partner agrees to the marriage, but they say it must be a marriage, but you will not be able to consummate the marriage. Isn't it so? It's exactly the same thing. So it's a non-proposal, but it gives you an understanding of the complex nature of how we engage in relation to this matter. And those are issues, obviously, from our side in South Africa we are still pursuing. The second matter that I want to maybe just highlight, because I'm trying to, project some of the topical examples so that I think our student community can relate to our contemporary challenges. The second example is when we speak about the need to transform global governance institutions, ladies and gentlemen, is on the decisions of the WTO organization. Now you would recall in 2000, we suffered under the horrendous global pandemic of COVID-19, isn't it so? It resulted in South Africa on the deaths of more than 100,000 people. That is friends, its families, its siblings, its children that we have lost in South Africa. For the one single reason, ladies and gentlemen, because of the question of vaccine nationalism. Vaccine nationalism speaks about the fact that when the World Health Organization actually categorized the COVID-19 as a global pandemic that transcends boundaries and borders, what your more industrialized north then did, ladies and gentlemen, is to stockpile vaccines for their citizenry. It stockpiled vaccines, it had an abundance of vaccines, And it refused, at the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, to share and distribute that vaccines to the rest of the developing world. Then South Africa's president, President Ramaphosa, which was then chairing the AU and was also subsequently identified as the AU champion on COVID-19 pandemic, made a case that, look, South Africa have the capacity and the intellectual know-how to produce our vaccines locally. You remember that debate. So South Africa, together with one of our BRICS partners and IPSA member, India, made the case to the WTO to waive for interim level purpose the productive patents for vaccines. It took us, ladies and gentlemen, probably a full 2 years before the WTO agreed to submit the privilege of producing vaccines for COVID-19 to the developing world. So when I say we need to transform global governance institutions, it's exactly what we speak about. The third example that I want to make, and it deals obviously with economic diplomacy, is the matter of our agricultural products. Remember, all of our agricultural products, many of them, apart from local consumption, we export it, for example, to the EU, to the European Commission, isn't it so? To the European Union via the European Commission. And we are probably one of the best producers of agricultural products, and in particular citrus fruits. Because a number of countries in the EU, out of the 27 member states of the EU, a number of countries says, no, but the EU Commission must protect us. It must protect us from South Africa that have proven to have the capability and whose citrus fruits are actually the most preferred in the EU. The EU then introduced a number of what we call your sanitary mechanisms to ensure that it becomes so difficult for South Africa's farmers to export to the EU as possible. So as we speak, we have obviously filed as South Africa a dispute with the WTO in relation to what we regard as anti-competitive measures. So I hope that everyone are au fait with when we speak about the need to transform global governance institutions, what do we speak about and what needs to be done, not only to improve our lives, but to improve the lives of all other African states and to continue to champion the plight of your developing world. Then, ladies and gentlemen, you know, there's a sentiment, and maybe I must be very careful how I phrase it, but there's a popular sentiment in society that we as South Africa, we don't need the G7 nations, because the G7 nations and the West generally has been part of colonialism. They has been part of supporting the apartheid doctrine in South Africa. And since '94, they have been against the democratic government and what we call progressive internationalism. Now the difficulty with that for students of IR is to appreciate that South Africa's industrialization, where we stand today, it's primary and historically because of the G7 nations. Okay? primary and historically because of the G7 nations. If you look at all your value-added products, the majority of them, if you look at your biggest automotive sector in South Africa, we export cars. We export cars. We export a car with an engine, complete tires, upholstery seats, fully make up. We export it to the G7 nations in particular, which means through that process we are able to industrialize. So we need to deepen our relationship with the G7 nations, but it must be on our national interests, isn't it so? Uguti, we can have relations with the G7 nations, we can have relations with your industrialized North, but if people want to have relations with South Africa, they must understand we have the triple challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. They must help us to industrialize. And that is our big engagement with the North. We want them to ensure that when we speak about science and technology, that we are on the par. We want them to be more truthful to us. And one of the issues, Prof, that I want to raise here is that all students will appreciate that we are going now to Azerbaijan, Baku, for COP29. Now, we agreed last year in the UAE during COP28, and before that, during COP27 in Al Sheikh in Egypt, that climate change is a necessity. We see it in KZN, because it was September, there was snow. Namhlanje, it's October, there's rain. It's not normal, isn't it so? It's a consequence of climate change. So we agreed in all these forums that there needs to be a just transition. So South Africa agrees that, look, we need to decarbonize. And for the decarbonization, what we agree to is certain nationally determined contributions, where it will be, to ensure that we lower our carbon footprint. We agree that, look, we are going to expand and accelerate our renewable program and our programs on the green economy, isn't it so? That's why you have your IPPs program, you have your solar, you have your wind, you have your green hydrogen. We are already speaking about electric vehicles, isn't it so? EVs. So we agree in COP28 about what we call just transition pathways and the loss and damage fund. Because the loss and damage fund, ladies and gentlemen, says, one, the industrialized North knows that they have primarily been responsible for carbon emission. Because remember, Europe is more industrialized than Africa. So their industrialization has primarily been a offspring of a carbon footprint. Now that as the developing world, we are obligated not to industrialize based on a carbon emissions. We agree on our renewable program, green economy, etc. So we agree with them in good faith, absolute confidence and trust. Then we get a rude awakening. After these engagements, the EU Commission takes a proposal to the European Union to implement what we call CBDM. It's a cross-border tax adjustment mechanism, which says if South Africa is going to export any product that have a carbon footprint, it is going to be taxed and it's going to be punitive. That is what they do. But simultaneously, they agree on just transition pathways But because of economic interest, they then leveled a carbon tax adjustment mechanism against us. So our relationship with the industrialized North, if there's any student of political science here, there's one important law of dialectics. It's called unity and struggle. So our relationship with your industrialized North must be unity of purpose to ensure the industrialization and the development of South Africa and Africa, but also we must be able to have a truthful relationship based on confidence and on trust with the industrialized North. Then the third concentric circle, ladies and gentlemen, that I want to speak about, and this has been obviously in the media for a number of reasons, where we speak about global solidarity. Now you would know that our freedom is because of the liberation movement, okay? Now let us be clear. The leaders of the liberation movements was the African National Congress, and it was the PAC, and you had AZAPO there. And apart from those political organizations, you have a number of people's organizations such as your United Democratic Front, UDF, you had your COSAS, you had NUSAS, AZASO, you had serious leaders that were actively participating in that struggle. But the one reason why we managed to firstly get our freedom is because of the constellation of forces that were mobilized to be against apartheid. And we did that, ladies and gentlemen, during the time that Nelson Mandela lavished in jail for 27 years. And Oliver Tambo was that type of a person that have been consistent of making sure that we mobilize for unity of purpose against the apartheid machinery. We have our freedom. We are obligated, ladies and gentlemen, for example, on the struggles with the people of Palestine. Why we are so obsessed with their just struggle on self-determination. You know, self-determination is a very important but simple word. It just says, since 1948, okay, the Palestine people, where they are staying now, it was their homeland. Okay? Let's first agree on that. So in 1948, where Palestine are now, where Israel are now, on the map, it was the entire land was the land of the indigenous Palestine people. Okay? And then, because Palestine, like South Africa, was colonized, remember who was our colonizer? It was what we call the British imperialists, isn't it so? So the British mandate in 1948, when the British decide to move out of Palestine, they then unilaterally divided the land of the Palestine people, and we say, look, we need to have a land that are exclusively for the Jewish people in 1948. Subsequent to that, the UN agreed, ladies and gentlemen, that look, let us agree that there should be a partitioning of the land of the Palestine people in the interest of world peace and security. That is what happened. Since 1948 up until today, that's 78 years. What the Israelis have done is to engage in further land dispossessioning of the Palestine people. That is, look, this is not, look here in this hall. You know, there's a very difficult study discipline. It's called actuarial sciences. Isn't it so? You must be able to have a certain level of intellectual capability to do actuarial science. You don't need that. It's about the struggle of land dispossession. And it goes against the decision of the United Nations. It goes against the decision of the United Nations General Assembly. It goes against the decision of the United Nations Security Council. It goes against the decision of the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. So in the entire system of the UN, all UN organs, without exception, have said the conduct of Israel to continue to kill, maim, and land dispossess the people of Palestine, it's unjust, and it actually borders on criminality. So that is the struggle. What we must do is to speak to your fathers, your mothers, your malumis, your aunts. In South Africa, Dr. A, the apartheid government, to justify the 1948 apartheid ideology, they use, in particular, the NG Sendenkerk, Neder-Duits gereformeerde Sendenkerk of South Africa. They use that. That church, it's a Christian church. It was probably one of the biggest churches during the anti-apartheid struggle, to entrench a fact that the struggle against the liberation movement is a struggle against the Antichrist. Okay? So that's what the apartheid government did. Because they have said that, look, the apartheid ideological orientation said that everything that are black, that African, constitute Antichrist. That was the ideological orientation. Now, in Israel, and I want us to be absolutely clear here, we don't have any problem against Jewish people as South Africa. We don't have any problem with Judaism as a religion. What we have a problem with is Zionism as an ideological orientation. Because Zionism, ladies and gentlemen, like apartheid, is what is the single cause of the genocide and the enlargement of the genocide that we see against the Palestinian people. And what they do, they say, no, in the Bible, we speak about Israel as the chosen nation. So everything that they do, they want to justify it in terms of biblical sense. And that's why for students here today, it's important as force multipliers in society that you must know that your Bible has the 10 commandments. One of it says, thou shalt not kill. Isn't it so? And no genocide can be perpetuated against a God, because you don't have a God that is a God of Zionism. There's no such God. Whether it's God, whether it's Allah, it's the same God. And that is our fight. And that's why South Africa, because of our common and shared experience with apartheid, we are having a particular proximity to the struggle of the Palestinian people, because in the UN Charter, it says one of the rights for all member states of the UN is the right to self-determination. And that's why we have utilized the ICJ, the ICC, and all the structures to propel the struggle of the Palestinian people. Apart from the Palestinian people, you must know in Africa, there's a difficulty of the plight of the people of Western Sahara. It's once again a decolonial matter with the Kingdom of Morocco. Look at the history and look at the fact that when Spain as a colony and as a colonizer agreed to move out of Africa, the Kingdom of Morocco then engaged in large-scale land grab of all the territories of the people of Western Sahara. that has minerals and that is the greatest arable land and that possess the greatest depths and quantities of fisheries. And as the students of IR, you must know about the economic embargo and the plight of the Cuban people. You must know about the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Ask yourself, the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, why it has happened? What is the difference between the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis and what happens in Ukraine? You need to ask yourself that issue. And that's why South Africa, we stand with the Cuban people, because the Cuban people are under unrelenting economic embargo, ladies and gentlemen, because of their beliefs as a nation. That, look, they believe in socialism. They believe to share everything that they have as a nation, and they obviously get punished through what we call unilateral coercive measures and unilateral sanctions that is not enforced by the UNSC, but it's primarily because of the US and a number of other countries. The last pillar that I want to deal with, ladies and gentlemen, which is obviously the most important one, is our Pan-Africanism, okay? Now, look, South Africa, we are fortunate. Today, we are the most industrialized economy on the African continent, but we are also the economy, our GDP is now the biggest, you know that. You must know that 2 years back, the GDP of Nigeria exceeded the GDP of South Africa. As we speak now, South African GDP is bigger. So that's important. But if we, with your 32.9% unemployment, and with the fact that the last time that we grew 6% of GDP that is required based on the NDP, the National Development Plan, says for South Africa to be prosperous, you need to grow your GDP with 6%. For us to have the same growth rate, ladies and gentlemen, than 2008, we need to industrialize, isn't it so? Now, our biggest problem is that our economy is an economy that are monopoly-based. Look in South Africa, you have basically 5 major banks only. Look in Europe, you have a plethora of major banks. One of the key mechanisms for our industrialization is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, ACFTA. So for students in economics, this is an important debate. Now your ACFTA, it's what we call a Pan-Africanist economic integration instrument. It's based on your Lagos Plan of Action and your Abuja Treaty. It says that, look, for us to stem our deindustrialization, as we speak today, out of your 55 African states, intra-Africa trade, ladies and gentlemen, stand at 16%. So what we do as South Africa and what we do as the rest of Africa, we trade with everyone else than Africa. Do you understand where's the difficulty? So your ACFTA will provide, for example, 90% tariff reduction. So if you produce a product here in South Africa and you export it to Kenya, it will have 90% tariff reduction. That's significant. So it will cost you almost nothing to take a product into Kenya. So the same product that you here produce, the only things that you will do is to pay your transfer costs. Virtually nothing. And it's a flagship program. And your ACFTA, and for us here in the neighboring states, there's what you call a South African Customs Union, SACU. 5 states. South Africa is there, Lesotho, Namibia, the Kingdom of Eswatini, Botswana is there. It's a customs union that is free for the movement of goods amongst these five areas. These 5 nations will be able to trade once its tariff offerings has been ratified by the Secretariat amongst itself. So it's going to be what we call a force multiplier or a game changer in terms of our economic interest, our economic benefit, and the prosperity of the South African nation. The biggest antithesis to that development, the biggest antithesis is what I call the big man syndrome in Africa. The big man syndrome, where there's still unconstitutional changes of government. You must have read about the difficulties in the Sahel, where there's military overthrow of constitutionally elected government against the AU Charter. Against the AU Charter, because the AU Charter says, when we speak about democracy and governance, is that there must be regular intervals of civilian ownership of government through an elective process. Okay? But you still have this difficulty where there is some amongst our leaders that still continue to think that their futures can be best determined, their interests can best be advanced through the barrel of the gun. So we have the difficulty of unconstitutional changes of government. Secondly, you have what we call violent extremism, illicit financial flows. Illicit financial flows, that includes the issues of the flow of small arms, human trafficking taking place. But not as the final recipient, but as a transitional hub. As a transitional hub elsewhere to the world. I think you must have witnessed in the past 2-3 weeks the massive arrests of drug moles that are taking place at the OR Tambo, isn't it so? And you must have read the subtext. Remember, in life, it's not your headline, it's the subtext. The subtext of all the arrests is a drug mole that is en route to somewhere. Isn't it so? So South Africa are seen as a conduit, as a corridor, as a transitional point to the rest of the world. And you know, ladies and gentlemen, it is for that reason why the Irish have revoked, in the entire 27 countries of the EU, the one country, Prof, that we had a free visa agreement was with Ireland. The Irish, 5 years back, warned us that your passport, your South African uniqueness and identity are being abused to get access from South Africa into Ireland. In Mozambique, you had a big insurgency. And the